Hey guys, if brassiness is something that you have a hard time dealing with, then hopefully this video will help you out. Keep watching to see how we tackled this color correction. You can follow me on Instagram at Christy@thecottage.
Okay, I haven't taken it before yet, but my client that I'm working on right now is orange. When she sent me a picture of her hair, I was shocked at how orange her hair was. It looks like somebody put dark color on her hair and she's in the process of trying to lighten it up. But apparently that's not the case. Apparently the last time she got her hair done, this is the first time that I'm seeing her. The last time she got her hair done, I think the lady had done balayage on her hair and she's naturally probably like a level 4. So this is why I do a lot of foliage, and I rarely, if ever, I don't even know, I don't ever do open air balayage because it exposes so much warmth in the hair. And I know that there's people that do amazing jobs at like doing blonde balayage and like making it a really pretty blonde color, but like I just find that I do better with foils, and so that's why I always insulate my balayage, foliage, whatever. So you'll see when we go out there like how, I mean, I'm just amazed at how orange her hair is, and it's also quite damaged, so we're gonna have to cut quite a bit off. So we're gonna start doing the surface with like a really good trim. And I told her the best thing that we should do right now is focus on just trying to tone her hair down. I'm very, very nervous to run lightener through her hair. So what I'm gonna do to start is just go through, she has very dark roots and her grow out really isn't that bad, but I do wanna brighten her up around her face because she does wanna be like a lighter, cooler blonde, but I just told her I don't think that's the best thing to do yet. So just to make her feel like she's a little bit brighter, I am gonna go through and do it a little bit heavier, like around her hairline. And then we're just gonna go through and like break her roots up a little bit with like a partial foil, just so that it helps blend it a little bit more. And so she feels like a little bit of dimension up in the root area. And then once I do that, I'm gonna go through and I think I'm just gonna paint really cautiously through the ends of her hair. I mean, it's very frazzled, and I don't know what the person used because it was like the last time she had her hair done was before me right now, was like in August, which was also for her senior picture, she said. So I feel bad that her hair was like yellow, like not yellow, it was orange for her senior pictures. And then the time before that was before shutdown. So it's like she had probably a lot of grow out. So that's why I'm just shocked that she has damage kind of in this area and that it's so frazzled, because that person must have used like 40 volume or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to like figure it out, because I swear are you sure like you don't have dark on your hair? They weren't trying to lift dark out of your hair, but no, she said they've never put dark on her hair. So it's just crazy. So to start the service off, we're going to now go over there and trim her hair, and then start the blonding part afterwards. And I'm going to use my Schwarzkopf Blonde Me with 20 volume, and because I know that it lifts faster, and as much as I like the blonde solutions, I just don't want to waste time waiting for it to lift. So we're going to use the Schwarzkopf.
Okay, so here's her before, and you can see the bottom, like 6 inches or so, is pretty frazzled. So to start the surface off, we're gonna cut her hair, and I made sure she was okay with it before, because I just told her there's no way that we'll be able to lighten through her ends at all, so we might as well just trim it off. And she was totally understanding and okay with that, so we ended up cutting those inches off. And then I also told her that some of the damage was kind of in the interior of the hair and not just the perimeter. And so I told her the best way to get rid of that is to just go through and add some layers. And so we're just going to go through, do the length of her hair, and then I tried recording the layering part of the service, but I didn't adjust my camera angle, so I didn't get a very good shot of that. So anyways, into the coloring service. So to start her color off, we're going to just do a partial foil and start with the hairline. And because we're just doing a partial, I'm just going to do a little bit to break it up, so that way when she pulls her hair back, it's nice and blended, and she just has a really soft little bit of brightness around her face. And because she does kind of have like such a darker natural root color, I was kind of thinking at first that we might not have to go through and break up her roots at all, but because her hair is a little bit darker, I just said it would probably be best and help the color blend a little bit better, even though we're just going to cover it up. But I don't want it to be like her darker roots and then you can kind of see where we color the hair after that. So I just said if we go through and at least do a partial foil, that will help break up your hairline a little bit better, so that everything will blend a little bit nicer and be a little bit more subtle of a color. So we're just going to do a partial foil. I do want to leave it a little bit brighter around the face, but my goal is not to be super blonde or anything, just because of how frazzled the ends are. I don't want to cause any damage, so it's just to be a little bit softer and subtle around the face, and then we'll get into the top part of her hair. It's so crazy how different the lighting can affect the color of the hair, because in this shot right here, her hair just looks kind of like a level 9, something that could be toned really easily and not be too hard of a service, but it's just crazy that it looks so much softer and subtle right here. But it actually, I mean, it definitely is very orange, so I just think that's interesting. And as I'm watching this video back, editing it, that her hair looks totally capable to lighten or to blend or whatever, but it definitely was kind of a difficult service. So yeah, I just wanted to say that because I don't want somebody to be like, oh, her hair looks like it would be blonde enough to be able to do whatever she wanted, whatever. But you know, those lights can be tricky and they can adjust things and adjust the tone, so just wanted to point that out. Now we're going to go through and get this top part of her hairline to make sure that everything blends and she has a nice connection all the way around her face. And we're not trying to have this be like heavy and super bright, whatever. Like if her hair, because it is a little bit brighter in the front, I know that it will be a little bit brighter, and I do kind of want to have this be a little bit more bold in the front. That way at least she feels like she has some brightness, but I know that the rest of her hair isn't going to be able to be super light, so I don't want, even though I do want this to be a little bit brighter for her around her hairline, I don't want it to necessarily be super bright blonde, because then there's not going to be easy transition from the front to the rest of her hair, and I don't want her to have like all this existing warmth and brassiness everywhere else, but then she has this really nice pretty blonde piece. So we are going to just kind of tone this back down and keep it a little bit lighter so she has some nice brightness around her face, but not necessarily super blonde. And so I just asked her where she parts her hair, so I'm going right down her hairline, exactly where she parts her hair, and I'm taking some hair on either side of where her part falls, and I'm gonna weave that, and because I want to make sure it blends really nicely. And we're just going to do a typical foil. I'm not doing like a baby light or anything. Actually, what I'm doing is trying to do a little bit heavier of a weave and heavier of slices than what I normally do, because we're not doing like a super heavy partial. we're really just trying to break up her roots a little bit. So because of that, I'm not trying to do a whole bunch of heavy baby lights. I'm trying to actually go in there and just right where she parts her hair, I'm going to kind of keep the foils a little bit closer together to make sure that wherever she parts her hair, if it falls over on the side of the part just a little bit, she has that coverage of breaking up her roots a little bit more. But once I get beyond this area of where she parts her hair, I'm going to start taking larger subsections and actually just doing slices, because again, we're trying to break it up. So I want to do a little bit heavier amount than what I would normally do, because if I go through and if I'm just doing like baby lights, that's not going to do anything. She's not going to notice like her hair, like any of the dimension that we're trying to add in her roots or anything. So I know baby lights are such a trend and everybody kind of says that they're doing baby lights or whatever, but just be aware of the service that you're trying to do on your client that you're currently working on. Sometimes baby lights are not always the answer. And so for her right now, that's why you can see I'm going through and I'm doing just kind of like a heavier slice. And she's not going to have streaks in her hair or anything, because we're doing it more horizontally. So all the hair is going to kind of fall on top of each other and blend. And because we're doing her hairline foils vertically, whenever she pulls her hair back, she's still going to have a nice blend, because that's going to cover up any of the streaks that we're creating in the hair. So just use your caution, use your best judgment. If you feel like somebody needs to use a heavier placement of foils, then do that. Everybody doesn't always need to have baby lights and have the same type of foil done. So right now we're just going to go through and finish up just doing her partial foil. And as I come down around the corner of the head, I'm going to keep kind of doing larger subsections in between. And this is just going to break up her base nicely, give her that dimension that we're needing. But again, we're going to cover it up, so any of these pieces that we're doing are not going to be super bright blonde. Like, I wouldn't go through on somebody that I'm trying to do actually blonde. I wouldn't go through and just do big pieces, or not like they're big, but I wouldn't do like more of these slices in their hair because it wouldn't blend as well. But because we're trying to just break her base, it's okay to do that, because we're going to go through and do like a root shadow to cover it up. And no, even if it is going to lighten up a little bit, it's not going to fade out completely. So that's why it's okay to go through and do it like this. And we're still being consistent. Like, there's some people that I see that are like slice and smudge or whatever, and they're just going through and doing such large, huge chunks of hair, and like not going all the way up to the root or whatever. Like, the work is just very inconsistent. And so I just want to make sure that you guys know whatever work you're doing, whatever type of foil you're doing, just make sure you're staying consistent with your sectionings. Make sure you're allowing it to lift, because one thing that I hate seeing is somebody that's really just trying to rush through the work, and you can see that it's super yellow around the face because that's where they last applied, which is why I like to apply first there, because then it gets nice and bright. And you see stylists that will apply their hairline last, and then they started in the back, so the back is super bright, and then the front is really yellow still and super brassy. And whatever you do, please just make sure it's consistent. Your client deserves to, whatever happens, whatever their hair fades over the next few weeks, your client deserves to have a consistent look, and that if it does fade, that it fades evenly. So even though we're doing larger slices and being consistent with it, so just, I know I repeat myself, I know I ramble, but forgive me for it. I just want to make sure that I'm explaining myself, whatever. Somebody made a comment and said, why does she keep talking in circles? Why is she rambling? And it's because sometimes I just get anxiety and I worry, like, what if I'm not explaining something good enough? And then I over-explain. It's always been a bad quality of mine. So anyways, we're just going to finish this foil up and then pop a few more in the back and then call it good. And you can see that just to break the base, you don't need to do a super heavy mount. You don't have to go through And you see some people that just do like basically a platinum card all over the top section of the whole head. And I don't feel like you need to do that. I don't think you need to be like that drastic if you're just trying to blend the natural roots in. So just go through and finish this partial foil, and you'll see that we didn't have to do a heavy amount to be able to break the base and get it to blend nicely. Oh my God, like, do I ever shut up? I'm watching this video back as I edit it, and to have it just be quiet with like music in the background sounds weird. Like, sometimes I just explain things and talk for 10 hours, and you know how I go on a ramble, and then finally when it's quiet, it's like, where did she go? Like, did she step outside? It's quiet. So anyways, I just feel like it sounds weird. I just feel like it's weird. It's quiet. So I'm just going to leave you and let you enjoy the silence for a little bit until I start going off and rambling about something else. Okay, bye. The quiet didn't last for too long. I just want to say in here that I'm going through and doing more of a weave, and that's because this is right at the top of the hairline, and there's not really any hair that might fall on top of this. Like, sometimes people get a split in the back of their hairline, so just make sure when you're going through and doing this section that you're doing some more fine weaves to make sure that everything blends really nicely and you don't create super heavy lines in the hair in the back. And that's it. Just make sure everything is a nice weave that will blend better, and back to silence. All right, so this is all the foils that we're going to do. Just enough to break the base, not enough to super heavily lighten the hair. And because her hair is frazzled and I'm very worried about causing any damage, I'm just going to take the bleach that I've been using. I'm not going to make any fresh bleach. And I knew I was going to be doing this when I mixed initially, so I did kind of over mix because I wanted to make sure that I had enough left over. I did not want to have to make fresh bleach and then potentially damage your hair because it's too strong. So sometimes you just got to use a weaker bleach just to try to break through any of that brassiness that's there. So we're just going to go through and paint through the ends, try to just lift it as much as we can. I'm not expecting a whole bunch of lift, just enough to push it out of that brassiness. I don't want to do a heavy amount to cause any damage or anything. So just go through, kind of paint these little panels, and then we'll call it good. I let this sit open for probably like just 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes or so, not too long or anything. And I did keep an eye on it to make sure that it was doing okay through the lightening process. So yeah, we're just going to put this on, let it process, and then that's all we did for the application.
Okay, so actually I'm gonna turn the dryer off really quick. All right, the washer's still going. Okay, so my client, I just washed her out and I let her sit for probably like 10 minutes with some bleach through her ends. And I did make, was it fresh bleach? I can't remember. No, I don't think so. No. So it's out for probably like 10 minutes and she's still pretty yellow, orange, kind of. I didn't want to let it sit too long and I didn't want to get a fresh batch just because I was afraid of what might happen if it would like frazzle her hair or anything. So because she has so much warmth in her hair still, and I know that she does want some brighter pieces. Like she was showing me pictures of very cool bright blonde and like that just isn't gonna happen today. But I do want her to be able to have some bright pieces through her hair if we're able to. So I'm gonna tone her right now for like the brightest blonde possible. If it'll even tone, just because she has so much warmth in her hair. So I'm gonna tone, I think, with my Paul Mitchell, like 10A, 10PA, you know, that typical thing that I usually do. Let me see, like a 9, oh, actually 10A, it would be really good. 9PA maybe. She already has so much gold in her hair that I'm not gonna add any gold to it. So hopefully some of these really bright pieces will tone nicely. That way we can leave some of those really bright pieces through her hair and then we'll just kind of pick them out when we go through and do like our color melt. So this is what we're gonna mix for right now. Paul Mitchell the Demi. And hopefully this will tone a little bit.
For her formulation, I did half 9PA, a quarter 10AA, and a quarter 10A. And you can see that she still has a lot of brassiness, which is what I was expecting, but I did want it to just do a little bit of toning whatever blonde there was, even if it wasn't much. Just a few pieces here and there is all I was looking for.
Okay, so I just got done talking with my client, and because she is still like a level, I knew that toner wasn't really gonna do much. I was just hoping that if there were any spots that lifted to like a level 10, that it would tone it so that way she could have a few pieces of brightness in her hair. And it looked like it toned a little bit, but just, it's still, her hair just overall looks very like level 8, 9 still. It's definitely like warm, just it doesn't appear as orange, I guess. So we just got done talking and I told her that because her hair, if she wants to be like an actual like ashy shade, that we're gonna have to tone down maybe like a level 7 through her ends. And then she'd have to be more like her natural dark color through her root area just because she wants it to go like darker to lighter. And she's like, oh, I don't want it to be dark like my natural, but I was like, well, we kind of have to, because for it to like kind of have, you know, that ombre where it gets brighter through the ends, we have to go darker than the ends of the hair. And then we kind of talked more about like, okay, well, if she doesn't want it to be darker, that we can leave it lighter, but just it will be gold, more warm shade. So we kind of had more of a conversation about that. And I think it's good to give your clients an option where if they're kind of afraid of it being darker and they're not sure how they're gonna like it, I think it's good to just give them the option, because you don't want to just do it and then they're like, why is my hair so dark? Or I wasn't expecting it to be this dark or whatever. So I just explained to her, like, we can keep your hair to be lighter and brighter, but just know that it's gonna be warm, and we'll try to neutralize it as much as possible so that it's not brassy, but just know that it is gonna be warm for sure. But if you don't want it to be warm at all and you want it to be ashier, then just know that it's going to be dark. So she was okay. She just wants to try the ashier shade. So after kind of talking about it for a while, I think she was like, just, okay, it's fine. You know, I just told her I don't know how dark it's going to be. I'm going to try to not have to have it that dark as much as possible, but just know that it probably is going to be like, you know, closer to her natural shade, which is like 4, 5, just because her ends are so dark, warm of a blonde. Or I said we could just tone it all like a level 7, but then, you know, you're not going to have that fade of like darker to lighter. And so she said, no, it's okay, just tone it darker, because she wants it to kind of do more of an ombre where it gets darker or brighter through the ends. So all that stuff is good to have conversations with your clients and just give them their options, because it's gonna fall on you if you just do it and then they're not happy and they're like, my hair is dark. They're gonna be upset at you for it. So give your clients all the options that they can choose from, and just be honest about it, and just tell them like, we can stay lighter, but you're gonna be warm if you're okay with being gold, you know? So, or if you wanna be ashier, then just know it's gonna be darker looking. So right now we're gonna tone for her root shade, and she wants to be ashy. So I think I'm gonna tone with like a level 5, 6. So I feel like she already has a lot of warmth in her hair from like the highlights, because I didn't lift it to be super white just because her ends were already so warm. So she already has warmth in her hair. So I think I'm gonna go through and I'm gonna tone with the Agora Vibrance, just because it does such a good job of canceling out the warmth. So I'm going to use 516 and 612 for her root area. And again, I'm gonna try to keep her front pieces as bright as possible. So I think I'm just gonna tap this like just right along the hairline, like just the last few minutes. So to start, this is what we're gonna do on her roots, and then I'll have to figure out the ends later. But also right now she's sitting with Olaplex on her hair. So let's mix.
For this formulation, I did half and half of the Agora Vibrance, and then I did equal parts with the 6 ball. You can see that the highlights that we did are not necessarily super bright blonde, and I only did that because her ends are still kind of yellow, so there's no reason to lift past that point. I want to make sure again that her hair is consistent and even, and everything will fade the same. And also because there is going to be a time when she wants to eventually go more blonde, and I don't want to cause any damage at that point by lifting her hair too light. And then when she has to lift the ends to make sure that those get brighter to match her roots, then she's potentially going to have damage up at the root area because we've already over processed that part. So anyways, you don't always have to lift it to super bright blonde. Just make sure you're making it even with the ends of the hair. So I'm going to go through now, and we're going to apply the root shadow, and we're tapping it on the roots and then combing it probably to the midsection. She has so much warmth and brassiness, so I do kind of want to take it down a little bit further, and this is kind of where we get into like being more of a color melt. So I'm doing it pretty heavily saturated up at the root area, and then I'm going to comb it down. So it's going to blend a little bit more softly through the midsection and the ends. Again, the goal is to try and preserve a little bit of, I don't want to say brightness because it's not going to be very bright, but she wants to have a little bit more of an ombre. So I don't want to cover it too heavily through the midsection and ends, but I do want it to blend. So that's what using the comb and kind of swiping it through the midsection is going to do, is it's just going to softly kind of blend the tone and help it melt nicely into whatever formulation we end up doing through the ends. So we're just going to go through and apply, and just the reason why we're covering up the highlights again is because I like the Agora Vibrance for this part versus like Paul Mitchell the Demi, because if you go over Paul Mitchell the Demi over highlights that you do, I feel like the color is much more translucent and you can really see the highlights. It really is good for just doing a very, very soft shadow, where I feel like the Agora Vibrance actually really covers the hair and has a lot more depth to it. So even though we did the highlights, I want to cover them up because we're trying to blend her natural color in with the roots with the previous highlights that she had done. So going through and doing the highlights and now going back through and kind of covering over them is going to create that really soft, extremely subtle dimension at the roots. If you go through and see somebody where it looks like they kind of have a very small amount of dimension coming through, that's probably because somebody did highlights and then covered it up with the shadow. So that's what we're hoping to create. I never wanted to have any highlights showing through her roots. I didn't want to leave any brightness up through the root area. I knew we were going to come through and go and do a root shadow or a color melt just to make sure that her hair blends much more easier from the previous color into her roots. If we didn't do the shadow root, but she had those previous highlights that she did, then you would kind of still see where her natural roots are. It wouldn't blend very easily. You would always still kind of see that line of the previous line of demarcation. So going through and doing just a really quick, simple partial foil just to break up her roots is going to help blend the color. So we're going to go through, finish doing her shadow root and helping the color blend. And this is kind of what she was saying, was that she didn't want it to be too dark like her natural. But I just told her it's not necessarily, like, we're not going to cover the highlights up to be as dark as your natural, but it's going to blend a lot better with your natural to be a little bit more soft and subtle. You're still going to see a little bit of dimension, but it's not necessarily going to be bright or anything. So we're just going to, now that we have it applied everywhere, I'm going to comb it more through the ends just because everything's kind of processing, and now I kind of want to start toning through the ends a little bit more. So we're going to kind of comb it down, not cover the ends up completely, but we're going to kind of start blending it through the ends. So that's where we're going to start dragging it down a little bit further. Now that her hair's been processing for a little while, we're going to go through and tap her hairline foils. And because we want to keep this a little bit brighter, we're not going to drag it through the ends. I'm really just trying to stay up at the root area just so that it blends a little bit better. We just want to make it a little bit softer at the root and make sure that it blends with the rest of the hair. So you can see here at the front especially that I'm really just trying to tap right at the root and not the scalp area. We don't want it to feel too dark or anything. So just try and tap it a little bit more at the forehead, on the hairline, and let that process for the rest of the time and call it good. So at this point in the service, I've decided that I'm not going to mix anything else for the rest of her hair. I'm just going to use the same formulation that I used for her roots, but because it's not going to process as long as, and also because we have Olaplex through her ends, it's not going to grab as dark. So I'm just going to start going through and picking out where we previously toned her hair to try and be brighter blonde. I'm going to go through and you'll see me picking out whatever little strands of hair, even if they're tiny pieces, because she does want to have some brighter pieces in there. I want to try to preserve those as much as possible. So I'm going to go through the ends of her hair and pick out whatever teeny little bits of blonde that I can. And the rest of the hair, because it's still brassy, I'm going to go through and start painting the ends of her hair with the root color and then make sure that I'm setting aside whatever little blonde pieces that I can. So doing a color melt isn't necessarily always doing a dark, mid, and light shade. Sometimes it's just doing the root shadow, letting it sit a little bit longer, putting some Olaplex on the ends, and then dragging the color through the ends and letting it kind of softly tone with the same shade. Sometimes it could be formulating like 3 different colors, sessions of color. Sometimes it's just blending the tone that you currently are using. So use your best judgment. And for her hair, because it is so brassy, I thought just using the same formulation would be good at toning her hair down. And I kind of also want to talk about toning for brassiness. And I know I've talked about this in other videos, but if you haven't watched them, let's just go over it a little bit more. So say you have a brassy level 7, which is kind of what she is. We can't, if she wants to have an actual true ashy tone, we cannot tone her with a level 7, because a 7 ash is just going to neutralize any warmth in her hair, and she's just going to be like a neutral level 7. She's not going to be an ashy level 7. So to create an actual ashy tone, we have to step it down a shade or two to actually give her that ashiness that she wants. So that's why, even though she's like a level 7, I have to mix like a level 5, 6 to actually make an ashier shade to give her that ashy depth versus just neutralizing her. So make sure if somebody wants to be ashy, or if you're dealing with a lot of brass, you kind of have to tone down a shade or two from where they're at to actually cool the hair down and not just neutralize it. So keep that in mind. So still, we're going to go through and paint through some of these brassy parts, and then as time goes by and it sits a little bit longer, then we're going to start kind of combing through the hairline just to try and tone that down a little bit more too. So that's going to process also for probably just like 10 minutes. We're not letting it sit through the ends for too long, because we want to cool her down, but we don't necessarily want it to grab too dark. So we're going to let that process, and then we will be done. Now that we're about to wash her hair out, I'm just going to comb all the way through her ends everywhere, just because even where those brighter pieces are, they're still kind of warm. So just combing through the ends, even where it's blonde, is going to help cool it down. And because we're not letting it sit, it's not necessarily going to darken the hair. It's just going to tone it down a little bit nicer. All right, now that she's all washed, we're going to go through and put some heat protectant on her hair, which I prefer using a serum. I don't like using a spray necessarily. I think a serum does a better job, and it helps like smooth the hair, give it a nice shine. It's not too oily or anything. Give it a little bit of a blow dry spray, and now we're going to start drying her hair. And you can see how nice and bright those highlights are just right on her hairline. And I'm glad we left those there because we're not able to go as bright as she wanted to be. I'm glad that we were at least able to give her a little bit of a more highlighted look around the front of her face. That way she has just that little bit of brightness to make her feel like she's not necessarily super dark all over. So look at that blend. I feel like it looks so good. It blends so nicely. And so look at where those highlights are right at the root area. You can see that it blends a lot better with her natural hair. And you can see that those highlights just very subtly break up the root area just to kind of help blend the color. So that's exactly the look that we were going for. Just enough to kind of soften the roots up a little bit without feeling like they're too dark. I wanted to show you right here a little bit more the after. So look how nice and cool the roots are. That Agora Vibrance does such a good job of toning down brassiness. It looks so good, and she does have that little bit of an ombre where it gets a little bit brighter through the ends. I like that we were able to keep a little bit of that lightness around the face. She was really happy with the hair. It still has some warmth in it, and it's showing a little bit more yellow because of the lighting. But and then the after shot, you guys, you know I hate a ring light, but I'm really happy with how cool we were able to get it. Even though we weren't able to get it as light as she wants, she was able to at least cool down. So here's her before again, super brassy, extremely orange, and kind of damaged. So I'm glad that we were able to cut off that damage. And look how pretty this is. This is my little spot in the salon that I found that has better lighting. But look how cool that blonde is. It's no longer brassy, and she still has a little bit of lightness through the ends from where I kind of like pulled out those blonde pieces, but her hair just looks a lot healthier, a lot cooler. And I feel like at this point she'll be able to grow her hair out a little bit more naturally. It won't be brassy. She'll be able to let it go a little bit longer until eventually she's at the point where we can finally do the overall look that she really wanted, which was going a little bit brighter. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you learned something from this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe.